Really? What do you understand of the social realism genre?
That it's just meant to reflect real life.
Do you feel there's a gap in the market for realist films about teenage and youth issues?
Not really.
Do you think there are enough films about Britain and British people?
I don't think there needs to be.
Is it?
Where do you watch social realism films and why?
Sorry?
Where do you watch social realism films and why?
I don't watch them.
Oh, it's the
Do you think social realism films depict life as it actually is and how?
No, they probably don't.
How do you come across social realism films?
Through last year's media students.
What do you think when you saw your first social realism film?
Haven't seen one.
Do you always watch the end of the film and why?
Always watch to the end.
Yeah.
Because then you get the full story.
What's your favourite genre of film?
I don't know. Probably horror.
Do you like films with an unexpected twist and why?
Yeah, because then you don't get bored.
Does it help you in your life and how?
Not really. I don't.
Does it help you understand younger or older, both generations and how?
They don't. They're just films.
Do you criticise them and why? Do you check social realism are correct and why?
They're not.
What part do you films play in your life and how?
Not much. I don't really watch that many films.
Hey, what do you understand of the social realism genre?
I can't say I've got a fantastic understanding, but I think I know a little bit about its history, and in Britain going back to what they kind of called the kitchen sink dramas in the 1960s, I would have said, early 60s. Quite where it's gone since then, I'm not really so au fait with, but yeah, I can know a little bit about its origins.
Well, do you feel there's a gap in life for realist films about teenage and youth issues?
I think there probably is. I think there are teenage life is quite complex, probably more complex these days than ever before because of all sorts of things, social media, etc., etc. And I think a number of teenagers find themselves in situations where there's no model. They can't go and speak to their parents quite easily about issues with life on the internet, for example, because their parents might not have the right experience. In fact, even older siblings might not have the right experience. So I think there's definitely scope for social realism in terms of providing advice for youngsters. Yes, I do.
Do you think there are enough films about Britain and British people?
I think to an extent, most countries now feel, with one or two exceptions, feel a little bit overwhelmed by American culture and the influence of it. I personally would like to see more British films because I think it's a real kind of sign of a nation's creativity and individuality. So I think it's really important that the British film market is maintained.
Where do you watch social realism films and why?
I would say I don't watch much social realism. In fact, I can't think of the last example that I would purely say is social realism. I tend to watch and read either fiction, and I've got certain kind of filmmakers are my preference, and none of them would really make social realism. Or I watch documentaries and things that are more science based and real life based. I wouldn't say social realism is one of my key areas of interest.
Do you think social realism films depict life as it actually is and how?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Do you think they depict real life as it actually is and how?
I think one of the issues with kind of social realism is kind of how real is it and how convincing is it. So I would say that some of the recent examples I've probably seen aren't terribly convincing in all sorts of ways. I mean, you could even say that some soaps are making some efforts towards social realism, but not terribly convincing ones in all sorts of ways, I think, at the moment.
How did you come across social realism films?
Probably through through studying a little bit of film at GCSE.
What did you think when you saw your first social realism film?
I think the early ones made a real impact. I think they depicted a kind of working class Britain that hadn't really been shown in film before, and I think that was an important kind of step up. They made some important films in the beginning of the 60s, made some real steps towards kind of allowing these voices that hadn't previously been heard, you know, some women's voices, to actually come to the screen for the first time. So I think that was an important breakthrough.
Do you always watch the end of films, and why?
Do I always watch the end?
Yeah.
Yes, always. I've never left a film without seeing the end. Just because, you know, it's if you've done a little bit of research and you've made the decision to go along and choose to watch that film, then I think you probably it deserves the respect of actually seeing how it concludes.
What's your favourite genre of film, and why?
Interesting. Probably, from my English background, probably a kind of there are a lot of kind of fantasy films that had quite a big impact on me as a child, and I would say they're probably, you know, films that have, a number of them, films that have still lived with me. Not necessarily kind of sci-fi, but of that kind of fantasy ilk. I'm trying to think of couple of examples.
Or anime kind of ones.
I'm sorry, kind of
anime.
Not anime at all, actually. I've not been exposed to anime at all, but trying to think of a couple of good examples. There's one of my favourites was A Matter of Life and Death, which is about a World War II pilot who crashes down to Earth and is taken away to heaven. That turns into, that's kind of realism to an extent, and then it turns into a kind of fantasy film where you get shots of heaven and all the rest of it. So that was a film that made a big impact on me.
Do you like films with an unexpected twist, and why?
I do like films that engage you in plot, yes. I'm not particularly a fan of kind of event films that rely on special effects particularly. They need a good story and they need a strong narrative, and yeah, a twist to the plot is a pretty important way of keeping you tuned in.
Okay. Do they help you in your life, and how?
Films?
Social realism.
Social realism, I think, can do. I think if you're talking about, you know, creating advice on a specific topic, yes, I think they can make real contributions to people's lives.
Do they help you understand younger or older, or both generations, and how?
I think most social realism now tends to focus on the younger generation. I think, possibly there is a market for explaining to younger people about how, you know, older generations might feel about certain things, about life in general, really. But yeah, I think they're both important.
Do you criticise them, and why?
Not particularly. And if I did criticise them, it would probably be that they're pretending to be real when clearly they're not in some respects. So it's probably in terms of, I criticise them in terms of their veracity, how close they are to the real world.
Do you say those social realism films are correct, and why?
Are they correct?
Yeah.
Depends on which ones you're talking about. I've seen some good ones on related to kind of cyberbullying recently, actually, which I thought were really effective, but I think that depends very much on the individual film.
What part do they play in your life, and how?
Quite small, and I think the best ones, we kind of use them in teaching a little bit too, so that's important, because they have and contain some significant messages, so they will be the most important ones to me.
Right.